It is our inflexible purpose to destroy German militarism and Nazism and ensure that Germany will never again be able to disturb the peace of the world.
On September 1st, 1939, Germany invaded Poland. This was the beginning of the Second World War. World War II was a seemingly endless battle for world domination by the Nazi Party dictated by Adolf Hitler. It all began when Hitler ignored the Treaty of Versailles that had strict restrictions on Germany after World War I. To gain more power, Hitler allied with Italy, led by Mussolini, under the Rome-Berlin Treaty. Then later, the Axis powers was completed with Japan, with their leader Hirohito. Other world powers disagreed with Hitler's leadership, so some countries created the Allied forces. Great Britain, led by Chamberlain, and France, led by Charles de Gaulle. America was not militarily involved until the attack of Pearl Harbor in 1941, 2 years after the war had begun. In the beginning of the war, the U.S. prospered in economy. The Neutrality Act of 1939 created the principal cash and carry. The U.S. obtained an enormous amount of money from supplying the Allies with supplies. Because the U.S. had attempted to be isolationist, they were not prepared for war. As a result, the U.S. had to create a wartime economy and recruit troops. To create a wartime economy, the U.S. changed the products made in factories under the War Production Board, much like World War I. Soon enough, the U.S. was prepared for war and signed an agreement with Great Britain. The ABC 1 agreement said that these two countries will take on Germany before any other country.
A state of war has existed between the United States and the Japanese Empire.
Fighting in Europe wasn't easy for the U.S. in that of Hitler's creative strategies. When Hitler attempted to invade Stalingrad, he was shockingly unsuccessful. The Russians, led by Stalin, had crushed the Germans. After, though, Russia had high casualties. So, FDR promised the U.S. would send troops to a second front. However, they did not. Instead, the U.S. troops fought in North Africa, and they attacked Italy. Italy was defeated, and Mussolini was then hung by his boots by his own people. Even though Italy was defeated, Germany was still fighting extremely strong. In order for the Allies to defeat the Axis powers, the Allied powers met at the Tavern Conference to create an attack strategy. During this conference, FDR, Stalin, and Churchill decided that the U.S. will open another front in Europe at the beach of Normandy. The invasion was one of the largest amphibious military assaults in history and required extensive planning. The Allied powers eventually took out Germany and pushed them back. While Germany had its successes and the Allied powers did, Japan also had tremendous and rapid success in the Pacific, all because of their ships. One major place where fighting occurred was the Philippines. The U.S. General Douglas MacArthur led the U.S. troops in the Philippines, and he escaped claiming, "I will be back." The turning point in the Pacific War came with the American naval victory in the Battle of Midway in June 1942. The Japanese fleet sustained heavy losses and was turned back. In August 1942, American forces attacked the Japanese islands, forcing a costly withdrawal of Japanese forces from the island in February 1943. Allied forces slowly gained naval and air supremacy in the Pacific and moved from island to island, conquering them and often sustaining significant casualties. Late in 1944, American forces liberated the Philippines and began massive air attacks on Japan. British forces joined the U.S. in early 1945. American forces suffered heavy losses during the invasion. Despite these casualties and suicidal Japanese air attacks, known as kamikaze attacks, American and British forces conquered the islands in mid-June 1945. On April 12, 1945, Franklin Delano Roosevelt died, so his vice president took his place, Harry S. Truman. On August 6, 1945, Truman told the United States Air Force to drop an atomic bomb on the Japanese city Hiroshima. Tens of thousands of people died in the initial explosion, and many more died later from radiation exposure. 3 days later, the United States dropped another bomb on the Japanese city of Nagasaki. Approximately 120,000 civilians died as a result of the two blasts. On August 8th, the Soviet Union declared war on Japan and invaded Japanese Manchuria. After Japan agreed to surrender on August 14, 1945, American forces began to occupy Japan. Japan formally surrendered to the United States, Great Britain, and the Soviet Union on September 2, 1945, thus ending the Second World War.